Okay, so we are smack in the middle of something. Rav Huna told us yesterday that even though you hold that when you buy one or two trees, you don't get any karka, and that, of course, the Rashba made clear, follows the shita of the Rabbanan, that moicher, bein ra moicher. So even though if you buy one or two trees, it doesn't include karka, but if you sell karka and you retain for yourself two trees, there everybody holds, even Rabbi Kiva holds, that you retain the property rights. And the Gemara adds that you have the property rights, even though if you would sell property, you get to keep the bar vadus, but you don't necessarily get to keep the property rights according to Rabbi Kiva. Even according to Rabbi Kiva, if you sold the property, you automatically get to keep the bar vadus in the property because that's not included in the sale of a property. Yet you didn't withhold any land for yourself, and therefore you would have to buy back access according to Rabbi Kiva. But with a tree, it's different. When you're withholding trees, there you are entitled to the land. Why? Because there it's important for you to point out that you get to keep the land because your trees are actually infringing on the property that you sold. It's sucking nourishment. So you have to be mishayir that you have a right to the karka. Once you're mishayir that you have a right to the karka, now to allow the trees to continue to take nourishment from the ground, you're also going to intend to keep permanent property rights so that even after the trees die, you would be able to plant new properties. That is what Rav Huna said. And the Gemara said that must also be according to Rabbi Kiva. So even according to Rabbi Kiva, that normally if you sell a property, I'm not withholding any of the property, and therefore by a bar vidus, I would have to buy back a way to get to my bar vidus. But when it comes to trees, when I'm withholding two trees for myself, there I am also retaining property rights that will first allow the tree to remain there and take nourishment from the ground, A, and B is even after the tree dies, I'm maintaining rights to plant a new tree in its place. That's what we learned from Gemara and Rav Huna and from the way the Gemara understood Rav Huna. And the Gemara challenged Rav Huna. The Gemara challenged the understanding that the Gemara had of Rav Huna because of what Reb Shimon says. Reb Shimon in our Mishnah tells us that when you're makdish, you're not makdish be'ein toiva, like giving a matana, like the Tanakama holds. Rather, you're makdish be'ein ra. But even though you're makdish be'ein ra, and you don't include anything besides the property itself, if there's a charuv hamorkav and a sadna shikma, that in any other place would not be included in the sale, it is included when you're being makdish. Why is that? Reb Shimon explained himself. Reb Shimon said the reason for that is hoil v'yonkin mistehektish. You're right. You're right. The tree is yours. The problem is the tree is being yoinik from the property that it's in, that you did give to hektish. So now you have a tree that we would consider as gidoyle hektish. Gidoyle hektish has the status of hektish, and therefore the tree becomes hektish. That's what Reb Shimon said. The problem is based on what we said, that even according to Rabbi Kiva, who holds moicher bein yofa moicher, even according to Rabbi Kiva, you're retaining for yourself the amount of land required to nourish your tree. So if that's the case, when you're being makdish, according to Rabbi Shimon, which is bein raw makdish, it's no different than a mecher. If you're retaining those two trees, you're obviously retaining, according to Rav Huna, you're retaining the rights to have those trees there, and therefore you're retaining the land that's nourishing the tree. So, if you're going to say that Rav Huna's shita is that no matter what, you're retaining for yourself the land that it's yoinik from, so then what's Rav Shimon saying that it's yoinik from Ektis? Ki kayanki midinafshe kayan. That was the kasha that we didn't end off with. We ended off with the teretz. The teretz was that Rav Shimon the Amar Rabbi Kiva, Rav Huna the Amar Rabban. We have to retract what we said on Amar Aleph. that in fact Rabbi Huna's shita that you're withholding the property underneath those trees, that will not be consistent with Rabbi Kiva. And Rabbi Kiva says moicher bein yofa moicher. Even when you're withholding trees, you're not withholding the property rights. And Rabbi Shimon holds that hekdesh is no different than mecher. And just like by mecher, according to Rabbi Kiva, you are giving the property, so too by hekdesh you're giving the property. So Rav Huna holds karabanan that moicher bein ra, and therefore you're retaining for yourself the land under the property, and therefore it wouldn't be considered being yoni from hekdesh. But Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Kiva, who holds moicher bein yafa, and hekdesh is just like moicher, and therefore you're not retaining for yourself any property rights. Say if it's a bar v'dus that you're keeping for yourself. Say if it's a tree that you're keeping for yourself, moicher bein yafa, you're not retaining for yourself any rights. From the guys, this tree is now being nourished from property that belongs to hekdesh, and it's gedolei hekdesh. Frag the Gemara, if Rav Huna's whole halacha that I'm withholding the land underneath those trees is not consistent with Rabbi Kiva, rather it's only consistent with the Rabbanan, so pshita. Why is that a chiddush? Without Rav Huna, I already know that moicher bein ra moicher. Even if I sell a bar v'dus, I'm retaining for myself a road and access to it. So if I'm selling a tree, the same thing. Why would I think otherwise that Rav Huna needed to come to the rescue and tell me that this is the Allah? Zaktimor, you know what you wouldn't have known if it wasn't for Rav Huna? Yes, you would have known that you retained the land rights for yourself so that the tree could nourish. And the owner can't say, rip this tree out, it's sucking the nourishment out of my property. That's taka given. That we would have known without Rav Huna. But Rav Huna is adding to it that once a person retains for himself that right, he's also going to retain for himself the right to permanently be able to replant that tree. The nafli hadar shasaluhu. And that's a chiddush, because on the flip side, when I sell the tree to somebody else, if it dies, I'm not selling him the right to replant it. But if I'm retaining the tree for myself, then I am also retaining the right to replant it. And the Rashbam explained to us yesterday what's the difference. The difference is if it was always my property, and now I'm selling the property but retaining the trees, I want to have the same rights to those trees like I had until now. Until now, had it died, I would have been able to replant it. That's the right that I'm retaining for myself. But when you're buying a tree, many people will buy a tree just for its payers, which means it's like a lease, it's a temporary arrangement. So therefore, when you sell a tree, if you're selling be'ein ra, according to the Rabbanan, then you're not selling the right to plant another tree once the tree dies. That was how we finished off yesterday. For the Gemara, I don't like that pshat, because you're forced to say that Rab Shimon in our Mishnah, who says that the Sedana Shikma and the Charuv automatically become hekdesh because they're infringing on hekdesh, because they're nourishing from hekdesh, you're saying that it only works out according to Rabbi Kiva that it's bein yafa. But according to the Rabbanan, that moicher bein ra moicher, in fact, you'd be able to keep these two trees for yourself. But that's not true. How could you say that Reb Shimon only holds like Rabbi Kiva? I'm going to prove to you that the Reb Shimon in our Mishnah has to hold like the Rabbanan that moicher bein ra moicher. And still they say, Reb Shimon says that there's an issue with the shikma and with the charuv. So where is our proof that Reb Shimon does not hold like Rabbi Kiva, rather like the Rabbanan from the next price? Now this next price is unanimous. I mean, it's not unanimous, it's anonymous. It's not quoting a Tana. We're going to have to figure out by what the halachas in this price are, who is the author of this price. So let's look. Hikdish shloisha ilanais mimata asar levesa. There's a formula of how much space you have to leave in between trees. And we learned that if they're mature trees, you need a whole whack load of space. And if they're smaller trees, the density is a sara levesa. 10 trees for every besa. A besa is 2,500 square amis. 2,500 divided by 10 is 250. So basically, if you sell a piece of property that has 750 square amas and 3 trees in it, that is the perfect density. And therefore you say, when you sell 3 trees together, and so too when you're makdish 3 trees together, if you consider hektish like mechira, if the proper density, which would indicate that you're planning to leave these trees there for the long term, and you're not going to relocate them because they're planted with the perfect concentration, that means you actually were makdish the property. What's the chiluk between being makdish a property or being makdish 3 trees and the land in between them? And that is as follows. Whenever you're makdish any type of property, how do you redeem that property? By assessing its value. See what it would sell for on eBay. See what it would sell for on Amazon. That's what you assess the value of. However, when you donate a piece of property that's a steyachuza, that's your property because it's the property that was given to your great-great-grandfather when Yeshua divided Eretz Yisrael, for that the Torah gives a special formula. And what it is it's zerach chaymer sa'arim b'chamishim kesef, b'chamishim shekel kesef. It's a certain piece of size property will be chamishim kesef. It's prescriptive. You don't just look at its value on the open market. So here the question is, did I donate property? If I donated property to Hektish, then we use this special formula with which to redeem it. But if I just donated trees, then it's just assessed based on its real value, which would be more expensive. So here we're saying if you donated 3 trees together, it means you donated property. So what is the impact? But what it was pachas become the yesalkin. Either there's a higher concentration of trees, meaning you're going to be uprooting these trees to relocate them, or there's a lesser concentration of trees, which means you're also going to uproot these trees to plant them in a more concentrated configuration. Or yeah, you might have donated 3 trees, but not all at the same time, which would automatically include the land. Rather, you donated them each individually. Now it happens to be that there's these 3 trees, but you only donated them individually. That would not include the karka and not the ilanis in between the ilanis that you itemized. Therefore, it's just like donating an item. We just assess the value of those trees, which might be a lot more than the prescriptive formula. What if you were makdish each elon separately, which did not include the property, and then the chazer v'hikdish is a karka, and then you were makdish the property separately, but now the result is exactly the same as if you would have donated the 3 trees together? We don't look at it that way. So if you would have donated all 3 trees together, then you don't even look at the trees. You just look at the formula of zera chaymer sa'arim v'chamishim shekel kesef. But now you've done 2 separate things. You've donated 3 trees. That was one donation, which will require them to be appraised as their market value. And then you made another donation of property, and you have to give the formula of zera chaymer sa'arim. So you have to pay twice, right? That will be the halacha. So you could be talking about the same property and the same trees if they were donated as a unit. You get a bargain of zera chaymer sa'arim v'chamishim shekel kesef. If donated separately, you have to redeem the property with the bargain price, but then you have to go now and redeem the trees individually. That is the
where does that come from? Where does that come from? The Yeshua formula.
David, you're muted. I see your lips moving, but I don't hear what you're saying, and I don't think you're saying no GST, no new taxes.
You hear me now?
You're not muted, but I can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
Now let me see if it's me. Maybe my microphone's open. Maybe my microphone. Second. Okay, try now.
Okay, you hear me now?
What a concept. When you turn it on perfectly.
Where does that come from? The Yoshua formula.
The Zerach Chayim Yisayim,
Yes,
it's a pasuk.
it's mamish a pasuk in Nach.
Yeah, no, it's a pasuk. No, it's a pasuk in the Chumash. The im istech uzasai yaktish ish lashem. It's a vehicle of Zayin. V'hoy ergecha lefi zaroi zerach chayim yisayim v'chamishim shel kesef. So it's prescriptive in the Torah,
Oh, okay. All right.
but it's exclusively for stei achuzas, for land and stei achuzas. Because on Amud Beis we're going to learn that a stei mikna doesn't have that leniency. So let's see what the Gemara says. So Mani, who is the author of this brisa that we just quoted? Let me look at the Aleph. Nema. If you're going to say it's Rabbi Kiva, which means Moicher is Bein Yafa Moicher, Amar Moicher Bein Yafa Moicher, the culture Hektish, worst case scenario is going to be like Mecher. And if it's going to be like Mecher, then when you donated the trees, you did donate land with the trees. So Oibazoi, it would end up being a land gift, and you should also use the prescriptive formula. So let's see what the base says. The Rabbanon, and if you want to say that we're going according to the Rabbanon, who holds that Moicher is Bein Ra Moicher, so now we're talking about the Machloikis Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanon. Rabbanon, Ha'ami Moicher, who the Bein Ra Moicher, Aval Maktish Bein Yafa Maktish. The Rabbanon, we're now equating the Rabbanon of Rabbi Kiva with the Rabbanon in the last Mishnah that we learned that treats Hektish like Matana, right? The Bar Plukta of Rabbi Shimon. So the Tana Kama of the Mishnah that we just learned on Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph says that Makdish is like Matana, and you're including the kitchen sink. Aval Makdish Ben Yafa Makdish. So once again, in this brisa, if that is the time of this brisa, it should have been a land gift. Who's going to hold that this is a separate gift of trees? Elapshita, we're forced to say that the author of this seemingly anonymous brisa, which now it's very obvious that it's not anonymous at all, it's Reb Shimoni who holds that when you give a gift to Hektish, you're giving it be'ein ra, similar to a mechira, right? But Reb Shimon alibid the man. There's two. So remember, there's two machloekes in. There's a machloekes of Reb Shimon and the Rabbanon in the Mishnah we just learned, whether or not we treat Hektish like a matana, and it's uber be'ein yafa. And then there's a separate machloekes between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Kiva, whether or not moicher is be'ein ra or be'ein yafa. And now we want to know Reb Shimon, what does he hold? Legaba the shaila of moicher be'ein ra or moicher be'ein yafa. If he holds moicher be'ein yafa, once again, we just said it a second ago. Ha'amar moicher be'ein yafa moicher v'chol shekein makdish. El pshita libed Rabbanan. Reb Shimon must be holding like the Rabbanan that moicher is be'ein ra moicher, and that's why he holds that nothing is included besides the trees. Because of Reb Shimon, and we have to see the gimel over here. Because of Reb Shimon, din gavoya kidin hedjit. The same way you're going to give a sale, the same thing you would include in a sale is what you would include in being makdish. And therefore, kihecha the moicher bein ra moicher, and he's not included in the property. Makdish nami bein ra makdish. So if you think about this, this is a huge problem for Rav Huna, because Rav Huna is trying to say, we were trying to in Rav Huna that he's only saying his halacha according to the Rabbanan, but Reb Shimon holds like Rabbi Kiva. But in fact, Reb Shimon does not hold like Rabbi Kiva because it wouldn't fit into our Mishnah. But if you think about it, forget Rav Huna. We have a problem with Reb Shimon, because Reb Shimon in our Mishnah, how is he going to agree? He has to be the Tana of this brisa, and you see clearly it's being raw, and you're not giving the property when you're giving hektish. So if you're not giving the property when you're donating trees to hektish, why is it that in our Mishnah, Reb Shimon says that you're giving bein yafa, and therefore your trees are being yoinik from hektish's land? So that is the problem. Whether or not you're goyish mishayir arya is a machlokes the Rashbam and Tosfos. So the Rashbam is not Goyersit because Mashai Ara would indicate that the kasha is a steer and a pshimin, and right now we're focusing on Rav Huna. However, the moment you turn over the daf says the Ela kasha, it's going to be shver on Rav Shimon Gufei. So never mind, you have a problem with how Rav Huna is going to learn Rav Shimon. You have a steer and Rav Shimon himself. The Ela kasha, and what is the kasha? Hoil v'yoinkin mistei hektish. Rav Shimon said that the yonik was the hektish, but we've just proven that Rav Shimon holds that when you give it hektish, the trees, you're not giving them the land. So, or if you're retaining for yourself the trees, you're retaining the land too. So how are we going to understand Rav Shimon? Ella, and this is going to revolutionize and change, turn over the whole Mishnah that we thought we had shot in. We're going to see that we didn't even know what it meant. Ella Rav Shimon l'devreim d'Rabban Karmelu. So hard stop. What does Rav Shimon really hold? Rav Shimon really holds that he's giving Ben Ra and he's not giving the land. He's not giving the land, just like in the anonymous Bryce, you're not giving the land to Hektish, and therefore the trees you get to keep. In our Mishnah, he says the trees you don't get to keep. That's not his own shita. That's l'devreim d'Rabbanan Karmelu. L'didi, according to me myself, ki'echi demoicher bein Ra moicher, makdish nami bein Ra moicher, bein Ra makdish, and therefore v'shiyur mishayir. When I kept the trees for myself, I also kept the land around those trees to myself, and they're not hektish at all, and I get to keep them in Gamsa. But you, Rabbanon, l'didchu, you say that a person is so over the top generous when he's giving hektish that he's including everything. Oidul Lemiyah agreed to me that he's not giving anything. The only thing he's giving is these two trees. Oidul Lemiyah the lo hektish ela charuf hamurkov v'sedanashik. So Reb Shimon in our Mishnah that says the only thing that's included is charuf hamurkov v'sedanashik. That's not his shita. It's not the Rabbanan shita either. It's what he wants to impose on the Rabbanan. Don't say someone's so generous that he includes everything on the property. No. Just say that these are included. Why? Because they're going to be yonik from the karka. The Amrulei Rabbanan loishna, and the Rabbanan told him no dice. We know. We hold that a person who's giving hektish, it's like he's giving a matana, and he includes everything on the land. And that is the resolution. That's the maskana of how the Gemara learns our Mishnah. The Reb Shimon is not saying what you think he's saying, because Reb Shimon holds that you are really retaining everything for yourself. We've already proved Reb Shimon cannot hold like Rabbi Kiva because of the anonymous brisa that had to be Reb Shimon, which means when you're being makdish, you're being makdish by raw, and therefore if you're keeping the trees for yourself, you're keeping the property around them for yourself as well, and therefore there's no problem of hektish. But you, Rabbanon, why are you so uber generous with hektish? Calm yourself down. Let's say most things aren't included. Say the charuv, hamurkov, and the sad nashikma will be included. And the Rabban said, no, everything's included because we consider hektish like we consider matana, where the lashon Rashbam is a person is giving be'in yafa yoser midah, over the top. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next. The mayu kimta Reb Shimon. You're stelling it on like Reb Shimon. You're stelling on that the brisa that we just learned on Omar Aleph, that anonymous brisa, is going according to Reb Shimon. We're going to have a problem with that because Ema Seifa, the brisa says additional information, which we quoted today as well. V'lo the final line of the brisa is elafilu hikdish esahilanis. Even if you were makdish to 3 trees individually, the chazer v'hikdish esakarka, we don't look at it like now the result is that it's a property that has been donated to hektish, and therefore you should get away cheap by only paying the prescriptive formula of Zerach Chaymer So'irim, the Chamishim Shekel Kesef. Rather, Dr. Brisa, we're makmer on this fellow. Kishu Poide Esayilonish B'Shavyeyan, we treat the trees as a separate nesina, which have to be assessed using their fair market value, and then you have to be Poide the property, the Chayzer Poide Beis Zera Chaymer So'irim, the Chamishim Shekel Kesef. So, just to simplify it, Reb Shimon holds you don't look at the end result of what now belongs to hektish. Because if you looked at the end result of what now belongs to hektish, it's a piece of property that happens to have trees on it. You don't look at it like that. You look at how they were donated. But the problem is, we're going to prove to you that Reb Shimon holds that you look at the end results. You don't look at how the property was donated. How everything came to be is Manish Nageya. What's Nageya is right now that you're prepared to redeem it. What is the status now? The status now is that it's a piece of property. Why? Because the Reb Shimon, Lezel Basra, pigeon, you always follow the scenario, the snapshot of now when you are making the pigeon. And therefore, v'nifraku agav arai. You should not have to be pointed the tree separately, rather just be pointed the property upon which are these trees. The Hashamin, in Rab Shimon, the also basar pig, because we know from another place that Rab Shimon holds that you look at it at a snapshot in time at the time of the redemption. So now we need to open up our eyes to a new halach. We know that Istei which is a sada that you received from your father, got it from his father, when you're pointed such a field, you're pointed with the formula that the Torah prescribes. But what if I buy a field from somebody? So I buy a field from my friend. Now I'm only going to get to keep the field up until Yovel, right? Because fields go back by Yovel. So let's say I bought such a field and I donated it to Hector. There, if I want to buy it back, I don't buy it back with the reduced formula of Zerach Misayim. That's not a Steyachuzah. There we assess its value. And that's how I pay you back. Now, what if you have a hybrid? What if you bought a field from your father? So right now, it's a Stey Miknah. But eventually, it's going to be a Steyachuzah. So right off the bat, if you buy a field from your father and he survives, he lives until Yovel, and you want to be pointed, you have to be pointed like a Stey Miknah, because it is a Stey Miknah, not a Steyachuzah. You didn't Yarshman yet. But now we're going to look at two variations of where it can get fuzzy as to what the status of this field is. The Tanya, you bought a field from your father, Vikdisha. So at first glance, it seems like you were Makdish or Stey Miknah, not a Steyachuzah. But before you were pointed, the Achagach Meis of it. So now this field that you were makdashit as a Stey Miknah is suddenly transformed into a Steyachuzah because your father just died. So you yashin his rights in it. Minayin shitei lefanov k'Steyachuzah. How do you know that we treat this like a Steyachuzah and you get your reduced rate, your reduced prescriptive rate when you redeem it? Talmud Loimar, it says in the pasuk as follows: Ve'im es Stey Miknasai asher loi misteyachuzas. The pasuk is quite redundant. It has, in order for you to pay full price, it has to be a Stey Miknah that's not a Steyachuzah. What is that extra loss? So we learn from here that it's not enough that it should be a Stey Miknah to pay the higher price. It has to be a Stey Miknah that never has the potential to ever become a Steyachuzah. So Zok the Gemara, how the Tanakama learns this pasuk. Soda she'ein ru'uya lihiyos Steyachuzah. The only type of field that you pay full price for is if it's a field that could never possibly ever become a Steyachuzah, meaning you bought it from a stranger. Yota Sazu, but this Stey Miknah that you bought from your father, that will eventually become a Steyachuzah, that would not be considered a Stey Miknah, that's considered a Steyachuzah, and you redeem it with the prescribed rate. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda v'Rab Shimon. That is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. Now, the Rashbam is careful to point out that at this point, I really explained the brisa wrong, because I told you that there's a special diuk from this pasuk that tells you this chiddush, that if it will ever be a kama Steyachuzah, it could not be considered a Stey Miknah. But I spoke wrong. That's the maskon. In the Havini of the Gemara thought that we're not learning it from the pasuk. About my default position, about the default position of Rab Shimon is that you don't care how it became hektish. You look at the scenario right now when I'm being pointed. So it became hektish. It was a Stey Miknah because my father was still alive. Now that I want to be pointed, my father had died already. Now it became a Steyachuzah. So the default position is you look at the scenario right now when I'm prepared to be pointed, and that means it's a Steyachuzah right. And that's the reasoning for him, not the dik of a pasuk. It's because of a default position that Rab Shimon holds everywhere, that when it comes to hektish, Forget how everything came to be. Right now, we're being pointed. Right now, to stay a chuza. Let's treat it like a stay a chuza. And that's going to be the kasha. Because in our sugya a moment ago, Shimon says the same thing. No matter how those trees and those land, no matter how it became hektish, right now, it's a sada. So right now, we should treat it like a sada. Yet Reb Shimon is not saying that. In our brayso, Reb Shimon says, no, the trees were donated separately. Right now, the land and the trees might all be donated. But since they were donated separately, they're treated separately. But if Reb Shimon has a default position that you don't care how everything came to be, you just make the assessment at the time that you're being paid, like he holds by a stei achuza and the stei mikna, it should carry true in our case of when you donated the trees first and then you donated the field. And that is the Gemara's kasha. How could you say Reb Shimon in the brayso says that since you donated the tree separately, even though now it's all one big property, you treat it separately? Reb Shimon's default position by a stei mikna is you look at it when you're ready to be paid. It doesn't matter if you, when you were makdish the field, your father was still alive, and therefore it was only a stei mikna. Now that you're coming to redeem it, it's a stei achuza. So that's why we look at here and now. And that is a stira. Here, Reb Shimon says you look at here and now. In our brayso that we learned on Amud Aleph, it seems like you don't look at here and now, you look at how everything came to be. Reb Meir argues on the position of Reb Shimon, because he holds you don't look at the here and now. You look at the origin. Reb Meir Aimer, minaynu lakeach soda me'oviv. If you bought a field from your father, umei soviv, va'achachik. So now, yes, you originally got it as a stei mikna, but now you own it as a stei achuza, and you were only makdish it after it became a stei achuza. There, Reb Meir holds it's a stei achuza. Minayin shetei lefonav k'stei achuza, Talmud leimer v'mestei miknosoi asher loy mistei achuzasa. Sada she'ena sada achuza. A field that when you donated it, it was not a stei achuza, that's a stei mikna. Yosy sazu, but this field where by the time you were makdish it was already a stei achuza because your father died before you were makdish it, it will be considered a stei achuza. So let's just look a little bit closely at this machlokes Reb Meir against Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda. Who is saying the bigger chiddush? I think Reb Shimon is saying the bigger chiddush. Reb Meir is saying we would consider it a stei mikna if you were makdish it al stei mikna. But if you were makdish it at stei achuza, then it's a stei achuza. Reb Shimon is going a step further. Even if you were maknit al stei mikna, we still consider it a stei achuza. So Reb Shimon is the bigger chiddush, right? So the question is, if you have one pasuk of the im stei miknosai, asher loy mistei achuzasai, you can learn the bigger chiddush from it. You have to learn the smaller chiddush from it. You always take the smallest chiddush possible. We've agreed. Reb Meir's chiddush is the smallest chiddush because Reb Meir's chiddush is if you donated it and it was a stei achuza, that we consider it a stei achuza. Reb Shimon's position is if you donated it even as a stei mikna, it's still a stei achuza. It's a bigger chiddush. So if you have one pasuk, you're only entitled to the smaller chiddush. So how is it that Reb Shimon got his halacha, the greater chiddush, that even if you donated it as a stei mikna, we still consider it a stei achuza? It must be because of their overall bias. It must be Reb Shimon has a bias all over that you always look at the here and now at the time of the redemption. Once he has that general opinion, it should apply equally to when you donated 3 trees and then you donated the land. If the bias is you looked at how it is now at the time of opinion, now at the time of opinion, it's a mere piece of property you should be making. Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon argue in Reb Meir, and they hold, let me just peek into the Bach. Reb Yehuda, Reb Shimon, afilu hecha, the hikdisha, the achekach meis of it. They hold, even if you were makdish as a stei mikne, and only then your father died, and now b'shas pinyin it's a stei achuza, have a stei achuza. It's treated like a stei achuza. Minolahu, how would they know that? How in the world would they know something like that? It must be that they know it, and he's skipping quite a bit over here. It must be that heicha de ikdisha, the achekach meis of it, minolahu. How would he know that? I'm sorry, I should have skipped this word. You go straight to minolahu. How would Reb Shimon know this extra chiddush that even though you donated it as a stei mikna, it's still a stei achuza? If you want to say they learned it from this pasuk of the im Remember, you have to learn the smaller chiddush from it. Also, that will only tell you the smaller chiddush. That if when you donated it, it was a stei achuzah, even though you bought it as a stei mikneh, you acquired it first as a stei mikneh. But when you were makdish as a stei achuzah, that's considered the stei achuzah. But you don't know, you don't see from this pasuk anywhere that if you donated it as a stei mikneh and you're only being paid as a stei achuzah, there you don't see that you have the kula, that you follow that formula. Elalav. So where did Reb Shimon get it from? He didn't get it from the pasuk. It must be because of his bias. You should do Ozli Basra pigeon. Because he always told that whenever you're part of the hektish, you don't care how everything came together. You look at the matzav right now, and right now it is a stei achuzah. So by the same token, in the brisa that we quoted, if it was Reb Shimon, we should look at the right now, and you should be paid the whole property together with the trees with one pigeon of the prescriptive formula.
But if he has this bias, why does he clung the pusik even smaller?
That's a good kasha. That's a good kasha. I don't know. That's a good kasha. Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak la'olam be'alma Rabbi Yehuda v'Rab Shimon lo yazel basar pigeon. There's no bias. There's no bias at all, and they hold you go basar how it happened, just like Rab Shimon says in our brisa with the trees. V'hacha crash the. In fact, they found another yitur in that same pasuk to be able to learn their higher level chiddush. The higher level chiddush, once again, is even though you donated it as a stei mikneh, it's still considered a stei achuzah because of now. And what is the diuk? The diuk is from one word, from one letter. Let's look at the pasuk. It could have said asher loy stei achuzah. So imkain, if you only have the chiddush of Reb Meir, lichtoi kra v'imeh stei miknasoi asher either loy achuzasoi and skip out the word mistake completely, or inami stei achuzasoi. What does mi stei achuzasoi? My asher loy mi stei achuzasoi. Meaning, even if it's a touch stei achuzah, we'll still consider it a stei achuzah. So therefore, even if by the time you donated it, so even if when you donated it was a stei mikneh, because your father is still alive at the time, but still has a little touch of stei achuzah in it, because it's royal eventually to become a stei achuzah. That's also going to follow the formula. The only type of fields that you pay for as a stei mikneh is if it's a field that doesn't have any little drop of stei achuzah in its DNA. It's a complete strange property that you bought from a third party. Yosy, even this property that started off as a stei mikneh, but even though it started off as a stei mikneh, it always had in it the potential to be a stei achuzah, to really stei achuzah, and therefore you get the lower cost formula of the zerach chaymer. Simple. So why is that?
The ABE is possible.
I don't think he's. So that's a very good point. You're telling me I could technically be a Yerush for anybody. So that no, it's only talking about if you're a current Yerush. So that's a very good point. He's not being mamayed such a small degree of steichus. Amar Rafun. So Rafun is a simple Allah. Charova morkov v'sat nashik. We know they're not included in a normal sale, right? They're not included in the normal sale, even according to Rabbi Kiva, who holds that moicher by yofa moicher. Taurus ilon alav, it has a status of a tree. The Taurus karka alav, and it has a status of karka. What does that mean? Taurus ilon alav, it has a status of tree. Heicha de akdish oizovin nei ilonois v'hai. If you either sold or you were makdish 2 trees plus this tree, this sadana shikma, or plus this charuva murkov, we look at it like you sold 3 trees. And if you sold 3 trees, the property is included. So lagabi that, these trees are considered trees. So that's how you see it has a status of a tree. Tyrus karkalov. Where do you see that it has a status of karka? We consider it so unique and so distinct that if you sell a property that contains one of these trees, you haven't sold those trees. As the Gemara said earlier, both according to Rabbi Kiva as well as according to Rabban. That was one interesting halacha Rav Huna told us. The Yom Rav Huna, another interesting halacha. Oimer, you have one stock, one single stock, but it's a stock that's overloaded with beautiful peiros. It has two saw, which is a massive amount of grains on this one little stalk. Very unusual for it to happen. But if you had that, Tyrus Omerlov, it's treated as one individual stalk, V'Tyrus Golish Alov, and it's treated as a whole bunch. Lamai Nafkamina. Tyrus Omerlov, it has the status as one stalk, because we know the halacha is when it comes to shikha, if you forget one or two stalks, then you have to leave them there. If you forgot three stalks, you get to take them all. So what if you had two stalks plus this stalk that had a huge amount of pears on? Tyrus Omerlov, the Shnei Oimrim Shikha, Shnaim Vu Eina Shikha. If two stalks were left over together with this stalk, that's not called shikha because there's three oimrim that were left over. But it also has Teres Kodesh Alov, the Tanan, Oimer Sheyesh Lo Shasayim, Shakhay and Shikha. If you even forgot this one individual stalk, it's not considered shikha because it's also considered like three because it had so much. So it works two ways. If it's by itself, it's not shikha, you get to take it. And if you drop two others with it, you get to save those two as well. Gabaldik. Omer Rabba Bar Chana Omer Shlok. Aruva Murka, Visadana Shikma, Banu Lemachloikis, Rab Nachum Bar Yosy V'Rabban. What is the machloikis that we're going to have? Let's have a quick look in the Rashbam. Aruva Murka, Visadana Shikma. Im Kodesh. If you were Makdash a field, does it include the Charuv Hamurka Visadana Shikma? Now that's a very familiar machloikis. We have the same machloikis in our Mishnah, right? So in Kodesh B'chlal Sada Im Lav Banu Lemachloikis Rab Nachum Bar Yosy V'Rabbanan. The Lirabanan, according to the Rabbanan, Kachi the Be'ein Yafa Makdish Kiditnam B'Mesnisin. That's our Mishnah. For Rab Nachum Bar Yosy, Rab Shimon, he also like Rab Shimon in our Mishnah. The Be'ein Ra Makdish V'Afilu Churu Shiyonik V'Nasada Loi Kodesh. Like we explained Lamaskana shot in the Bryce, in the Mishnah, that Rab Shimon is not saying that the Sadna Shikma becomes Kadosh. That was only limited to Rabbanan. But he himself holds that it wouldn't be Kadosh. The Be'en Ra, Kol Kach, Hikdish Asada, when you're Makdish a field, you do it with such a Be'en Ra, Sheshayir Min Asada, Litzarach Yanikas Chruv Shalom. You even retained for yourself all of the land that your Charuv is joining from, so it doesn't become Gedula Hektish. And this is exactly the Machloikis that we explained in the Tabakamo and Rab Shimon earlier today in the Gemara. Rab Shimon the Devreim the Rabban Kamalu. This is what Rish Lakish heard over from his Rebbes. The Rabban Nachum Bar Yosy, spiritually like Rab Shimon in our Mishnah, the way we explained Rab Shimon today. Correct the Gemara. So why bring in these people? Why don't you go straight to the Mishnah? V'leima Machlokes Rab Shimon Rabbanan. Right? Let it just say the source of the Machlokes. Hakamash Milan Rab Nachum Bar Yosy Rab Shimon spiritually. We're just trying to show you that Rab Nachum Bar Yosef holds like Rab Shimon, and he learned Pshat in Rab Shimon the way our Gemara did, that Rab Shimon wasn't saying his own Shita, rather Rab Shimon was just saying over L'ditchu, according to you, Rabbanan, at least be molded to me in this respect. Baruch Hashem, we finished Hamoicher Sabayis, so B'lineder, Hadin Alach Hamoicher Sabayis, B'lineder, Hadin Alach Hamoicher Sabayis, B'lineder, Hadin Alach Hamoicher Sabayis. Hamoicher Sasvina is a little bit drier. It talks about when you sell a ship, what is included in the ship, what is not. Does it include the water skis? Does it include the tow line? Does it include the tube? Does it include the pump to blow up the tube? They didn't have so much fun in those days, so they don't have these things. But the Gemara is going to very quickly get into very fascinating Agadah to Gemaras. Okay, everyone should have an awesome day on the second day of Elul.